Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and after being let go by his bank, Sherman looked for another job that would fulfill his ambition to make it on his own away from the Ewings. Sherman would travel to Ohio after settling the business of the bank in California. Thomas Ewing offered his foster son and son-in-law a job at the salt works, but Sherman would be rescued from having to work in Ohio when his foster brother and brothers-in-law, Thomas Ewing Jr. and Hugh Boyle Ewing, offered him a partnership in their law firm in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Sherman would manage Thomas Ewing Sr.'s land holdings in Kansas and act as the banker for the Ewing brothers' law firm. However, it quickly revealed itself to Sherman that he needed to become a lawyer as well. When a judge came to the office, he inquired about being admitted to the bar. The judge directed him to his clerk at the nearby courthouse. When Sherman approached the clerk about a test to become a lawyer, the clerk waved off any test and told Sherman he would admit him to the bar on the ground of general intelligence, no test necessary. Even though he was technically a lawyer, Sherman only appeared at court twice, both times he lost. Only one of those cases' details remains. Sherman presented the facts of the case, but the opposing lawyer read page after page of cases, none of which had anything to do with the case, but the justice declared that the other lawyer apparently knew what he was talking about and sided in favor of the long-winded lawyer. Sherman left the courtroom disgusted, but would laugh about the experience later, saying, "The little bow-legged gnat beat me slick and clean and came near taking my boots." To supplement his income, Sherman sold taters and corn, as well as took part in horse and mule auctions at Fort Leavenworth. In late 1858, Ellen and the children, minus Minnie, would come to Fort Leavenworth. By February 1859, Ellen became pregnant again and longed for Lancaster once again. Sherman had to send his family back to Lancaster in the spring because he couldn't provide for them, with Thomas Jr. and Bull absent from the law firm. Sherman would get a farm started for Thomas Ewing's nephew outside of Fort Leavenworth, and when a gold rush occurred near Pikes Peak in the Rockies, Sherman planned to profit off the traffic through the farm. He stored thousands of bushels of corn on the farm in preparation to sell it to the speculators and gold seekers as they headed west, but his corn idea was a bust. Desperate to gain some kind of financial stability and seeking the family feeling that the Army could give him, he reached out to Don Carlos Buell, an Army friend in the Adjutant General's office. He asked for a position in the pay department. Buell unfortunately informed him that those positions would be filled with political appointments, but did know that a position was opening up at the Louisiana Military Seminary. Sherman applied for the position and was chosen to be the superintendent and professor of engineering, architecture, and drawing. The Ewings at this time suggested for him to go into a banking venture in London, but Sherman knew that he wouldn't see his family. But if he went to Louisiana, Ellen and the children would most likely come with him. He took the job and consulted Don Carlos Buell and George B. McClellan about how to organize a military school. He visited a military school in Kentucky and wrote to the head of the Virginia Military Institute about how to run such an institution. His brother John had just joined the new anti-slavery Republican Party, and he feared that his brother's anti-slavery politics would hurt him at the Louisiana Military Seminary. Sherman himself believed that slavery was the natural social order for blacks, but he also believed that the Union also was the core of social order. He would write before he traveled to Louisiana that if Southerners died to protect themselves against blacks or abolitionists, I will help. If they propose to leave the Union on account of a supposed fact that the Northern people are all abolitionists like Joshua Giddings and John Brown, then I will stand by Ohio and the Northwest. When he got to the small town of Pineville, Louisiana, he was displeased with its location, being located 3 miles from Alexandria in a thickly wooded area. The seminary building, however, was gorgeous, a 3-story high building with 5 4-story towers. Sherman and the other officials of the school began formulating the rules and regulations, basing them on those of the Virginia Military Institute. His position as superintendent gained a lot of attention from the Louisiana officials, and he had dinner with many of them, including the governor. In discussions with these men, Sherman clearly outlined his support of slavery to prevent his brother's politics from influencing his position. One of his biographers would write, "He told the officials gathered around the table that the people of Louisiana were hardly responsible for slavery, as they had inherited it. Were he a member of the state legislature, however, he would deem it wise to bring the legal condition of slaves more near the status of human beings under all Christian and civilized governments. He would forbid the separation of families through sale and would repeal any law that prevented slaves from learning how to read and write. The dinner guests listened quietly, and when Sherman finished, one banged his fist on the table and exclaimed, "By God, he is right." Another time, Sherman expressed his belief in black inferiority, his opposition to emancipation, and his plans to purchase house slaves when Ellen and the family joined him. He put out a clear message he was a supporter of slavery, not because it was politic to hold that position in Louisiana, but because he firmly believed that freedom for slaves meant disorder for society. The doors of the school opened on January 2, 1860, with students coming in throughout the month. One of the students was the son of Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard, who requested that his son's roommate be someone very studious with good habits. Sherman settled into his duties and was content. Even problems that arose didn't stir him to anger. He simply tackled the problem and went on. When one student pulled a knife on another for calling him a liar, Sherman expelled the boy for his dangerous behavior. On another occasion, he sniffed out the culprit who drew a naked man urinating on a classroom wall. Although many of the boys were rambunctious, Sherman handled them sternly, but they always saw him as a kind and fair man. He regularly regaled the boys with stories from his time in the Army, and when their uniforms arrived in the spring of 1860, he organized a dance so they could show off their uniforms to the local girls. Sherman asked the Board of Supervisors for a raise and mentioned the banking opportunity in England. He wrote to Ellen, "If you hear I have concluded to stay here, just make up your mind to live and die here, because I am going to take the bit in my mouth and resume my military character and control my own affairs. Since I left New Orleans, I have felt myself oppressed by circumstances I could not control, but I begin to feel footing and will get saucy. I supposed I was the Jonah that blew up San Francisco, and it only took 2 months' residence in Wall Street to blow up New York, and I think my arrival in London will be the signal of the downfall of that mighty empire. If Louisiana was fool enough to give me $5,000 a year, we will drive our tent pins and pick out a magnolia under which to sleep the long sleep. But if she don't, then England must perish, for I predict financial misfortune to the land that receives me." At the end of July, Sherman oversaw the final examinations, and when the school session ended, he would travel to Lancaster to see his family, then proceed to Washington, where he would get training equipment and weapons from the Secretary of War, then go to New York, where he would purchase volumes of books for the school, including Peter Parley's Universal History. No doubt he remembered the valuable information he gained from Peter Parley's books he read at the Ewings as a child. His journey north brought new fears to Sherman, the fear of secession. Talk about disunion pervaded all conversations, and Sherman was drawn into the political debates, whether he wanted to or not, because secession was becoming more real as the days went by.